Invocation. Towards the One, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of Guidance. Amen. Many, many of you and of other human beings that I know, including myself, found Sufism through the dances of universal peace. Alhamdulillah and Yashakur for Sufi Ahmed Murad Chishti Murshid Samuel L. Lewis. I know that's a lot of weird words and titles and names that are not familiar to a lot of people. And when you're first finding Sufism as a particular field of study and life management, it takes a long time to get used to the words and the titles and references. So a big part of why I want to hold a series of meetings as Sufi 101 is to try to unpack and clarify some of those strange words and titles that we use. So since many of you on this Zoom meeting today and who are likely to find this recording found the Sufism through the dances of universal peace, that feels like a natural, beautiful way to start an introduction. The dances of universal peace, known by that title, have been called different things over the years, including Sufi dancing was one of the early names for them, or just peace dances. And the dances are an interfaith Sufi practice that was shaped by Samuel L. Lewis, was his Muggle name. And Samuel Lewis has developed a lot of different names and titles that those of us who find the dances know him as. Commonly, we refer to him as Murshid Sam, or used to be more commonly known as Sufi Sam, and sometimes with capital S, capital A, capital M, Sam, which then is an acronym for his Sufi names, Sufi Ahmed Murad. So Sufi is both a word, an idea, and a title that means someone who is on the path of wisdom, that is looking for, trying to uncover and understand the essential fundamental wisdom that is available to all beings, to all human beings who are paying attention to trying to recognize the capital R, real. We'll get into some of those things as well. It is also used as a title and acknowledgement of someone who has attained a particular level of accomplishment and autonomy on the Sufi path. That a Sufi is someone who has reached the 9th level of initiation in the system of another set of beautiful names, Inayat Khan. And so the Sufi is someone who has learned and done the things and the practices and has attained a level of knowledge and mastery in order to function as a teacher in this lineage, in this tradition. So Sufi, that's the first, the S of Sam. Ahmed and Murad are more titles for him as a being, a student, a practitioner on the path of wisdom. So that's probably too much about that. The dances of universal peace were Murshid Sam's inspiration as a way of deepening the prayer practices that are given, assigned, and trusted to students on the path of Sufism or any faith tradition. But for him, Sufism was a primary faith tradition. And the dances are interfaith, meaning that they have practices that come from a lot of different faith traditions, of religions, of spiritual paths that include spoken and sung mantra, sacred phrases from a lot of different faith traditions that are woven into also an embodied practice that are kind of pretty much folk dances, because Murshid Sam, Sufi Sam, was a folk dance enthusiast and had a stroke of genius inspiration about really needing the practices to not be stuck on the cushion in isolation, but brought into embodied form with community, because singing and dancing and praying together and inviting and honoring all the different faith traditions was the biggest part of his recipe for peace on earth, which was to sing, dance, and pray together. So this is what he actually wrote this in letters, saying that this was the answer to how to accomplish, to move into world peace, is to eat, dance, and pray together. So he started the dances of universal peace, that is uh, physical dancing, embodied singing, and the sacred phrases from lots of different faith traditions. Part of the inspiration for this, the primary essential inspiration, came from what Inayat Khan called the universal worship service. And he also called it the Church of All, even though he said that you don't have to call it a church, but if we're going to call it a church, because it's a spiritual practice that we share together, it can accurately be called the Church of All, that is inclusive of everyone on the planet and all of the faith traditions. So that was really the starting point of the dances of universal peace, that were formalized, is that the word for it? Established as a practice in the very late 1960s, 1968 into 1971 is when Murshid Sam died, but they have continued to develop and be a robust practice available to a lot of people in a whole lot of countries all around the world. I suspect by this time there are hundreds of thousands of people that have participated in and found the practice of the dances of universal peace. Okay, so many of us, through the dances of universal peace, we find community and a shared practice that enlivens the heart, that is inclusive, that introduces us to faith traditions that we were not originally familiar with through different language of sacred phrases, and that practice naturally and beautifully awakens the heart to more tolerance, more understanding, more curiosity, more interest, and more heartfelt respect for the different faith traditions, which is absolutely the fundamental interest and intention of the Sufi path that was taught by Murshid Sam's first Sufi teacher, Inayat Khan. So Inayat is his first name, Khan is his last name, and often most of us, when we refer to him, we use lots of different phrases of respect and honorifics. Uh, Usually that includes the word Hazrat. Hazrat Inayat Khan is even the way that his name is listed on some of his publications, on some of his books, Hazrat Inayat Khan. So it looks like Hazrat is his first name, but it is not. Hazrat means the most respected or the most venerated. And it also means an immanent presence. It means that this being is available to us all the time, anywhere, any moment of our lives that we wish to attune to, remember, ask him, feel his vibration, he's right there with us. The ongoing living soul presence of Inayat Khan, his first and last names. Now, we also often refer to him as Murshid, which means teacher. And the word Murshid means the embodiment, the integrated reality of all of the teachings, of all of the information and the practices that are available. So we also use the word Murshid for Sam, and Murshid Sam is a common way we refer to him. We also, for Inayat Khan, will sometimes expand Murshid into a longer title of Pure O Murshid. Inayat Khan. And pir means the elder or the spiritual leader of, or the spiritual head of a particular tradition. So in that way, Pir o Murshid means that he is the elder of the teachers, Hazrat, the most respected and always available Inayat Khan. I know that's a lot of words. We're going to move on from that, but if you need to review that, there will be a recording or you can ask about things later. So Hazrat Piro Murshid Inayat Khan, as the first Sufi teacher of Murshid Sam, was traveling and teaching and met Murshid Sam in San Francisco in the very early 1900s. The Inayat Khan came to the United States in 1910, or he started his journey in 1910. He didn't actually arrive until 1911, but 1910 is the starting point of where we acknowledge his beginning of his teaching journey from India. So Inayat Khan was born and raised in India, in Baroda, and was first we would say first he was a mystic. First, he was interested, even as a child, in the realization and the direct experience of God. He was raised in a Muslim household, was raised in the Islamic tradition, religion, but was exposed through his community, through the society that he was moving in, his culture in India, gave him a lot of experience with and training in Hindu schools and exposure to a lot of different faith traditions. Christianity, Judaism, Zoroastrianism were among them, and Buddhism. And but his home religion was Islam. There are stories about him praying, doing 5 times a day prayers, as was the family tradition. And then as a child, maybe nobody's quite sure, maybe 7 or 8 years old, going to his father and saying, we do all of these prayers, but I've never actually understood why, or what is this supposed to do? And because I don't really understand it, I'm not going to do it anymore. And that's a paraphrase of translation, obviously, but that's the essence of him going and questioning what this was about. And his father, in his wisdom, saying, I understand that this needs to feel relevant for you. And so it's meaningful to me, and you can do what you like. And Inayat Khan felt that he was given enough permission to question and the freedom to discover for himself. And so he changed his mind and said, I think I'll do the prayers and just see what's there. But then with an intention about feeling and experiencing for himself what the prayers were about and who Allah is, who God is, what this ideal and the focus of prayer is about. So he was very sincere in his practice from very early on. It wasn't until he was 18 that he started actively seeking and looking for a Sufi teacher. And he had a vision of a teacher that he was supposed to be finding, or that he was curious about. And so this was early in life, late teens, early 20s, that he started a sincere pursuit for a master. And then eventually he found his Sufi master, Abu Hashim Madani, in Hyderabad, and then like dove into the Sufi teachings with great sincerity and with the guidance of a teacher, which is a key characteristic and essential function of Sufism as a tradition in any of the tariqats, that is, any of the forms of Sufism. And there are many, and they are widely varied in their function, the schools of Sufism. So when Inayat Khan started actually traveling and teaching, starting in 1910, he was very clear that Sufism comes in lots of forms and is inclusive and welcoming of all of the faith traditions. And so he actually drew a very clear distinguishing line between any particular religion and Sufism. And there are many ways that he described that Sufism is the path of wisdom, that the root of the word Sufism is, he said, Sophia, which is wisdom. And he tied that both to Arabic, Persian, and Latin roots that are all saying the same thing, that it is the path of wisdom. He said that Sufism is not a religion and it is not tied to any religion. And that at the same time, any individual seekers, students, people who are pursuing wisdom that are deliberately on a path of Sufism have their own faith traditions, their religious cultures and practices that feel right and good for them, that are the home of their soul, and that Sufism helps strengthen and illuminate the practices and the path that each individual person is already walking. So it is not necessary for anyone to abandon or to change anything about the practices and the beliefs that they carry, that Sufism helps deepen and enrich the paths that each person holds. He also was very explicit in saying, if you are not part of any faith tradition or any religion or spiritual path, Sufism as a path of wisdom is still available and relevant and can be useful, meaningful, and help you develop wisdom and mastery in your own life. That was 14 minutes, but I think that's a good pause moment. Hold on a second while I pause the recording. All right. I'm having a good time. I love this stuff. I'm glad you love it too. Or I'm glad you're curious about it and seeing if you love it. That's excellent. Perfect also. Okay, so I want to say a little bit more about Islam, because if any of you, as I'm sure most of you, maybe all of you have done, and I have done also, gone to Murshid Google and said, what is Sufism? That you get the pat answer of, it is the mystical branch of Islam. And that is usually true. So I always want to be so careful about this and saying that so often people who are participating in the Sufi path that Inayat Khan brought say it is not Islam. And people who are involved in or aware of this context of Sufism as an aspect of Islam, there's a basic like headbutting that happens, which is absolutely not necessary. There's no headbutting required or invited or encouraged, that no headbutting, that really, it is all true. It is all accurate and right and good, and everything is functioning in the way that it is designed and intended to function, and it is all perfect and beautiful. So almost all Sufism that you find, I'm putting it in quotes because that's like a word that is still a working word, like, and it depends on what we mean by that word. So that's why I'm putting it in quotes. Almost all Sufism is Islamic, and almost all of the Sufi paths, the schools, which is tariqa, is a word that means the school or the path or the specific form of teachings of Sufism. Almost all of the tariqats are Islamic. And so that is absolutely true. Some Sufi tariqats are inclusive, welcoming, interfaith, and are willing to train, to initiate, and to guide murids, students that participate in, are part of other faith traditions. Not all, but almost all Sufi tariqats require in order for someone to be initiated, expect someone to be Muslim. That is not true for all of them. And certainly the forms of Sufism that trace their roots and that take their guidance and inspiration from Inayat Khan are very inclusive. You can find plenty of people that will argue, well, that means that it's not Sufism. I would respectfully disagree. It is a specific form of Sufism. It is a path of wisdom. And Inayat Khan even addressed this as a problem with language. And he really put it in that context. It's a problem of language, but he knows and explains very clearly what Sufism means, and very clearly what he's teaching is Sufism. And other people use that word differently, and that's fine. And some of his students, while he was alive, said, so if we know that people are going to misunderstand it, why do we have to call it Sufism? And he said, because it's the right word for it. We have to call ourselves something. And if we don't, they will call us something worse. That was his answer. If we don't call ourselves something, other people will call us something and it'll be worse. So that was his answer, which I think is fun and beautiful. He actually had a very active, lively sense of humor, which comes through in some of his writings and teachings. Okay. Before I go into some more specific things about that, I want to address this one little detail that was asked so perfectly, which is, what's the difference between amen and amin? I can throw in there also to just add a little confusion. Amen. They're fundamentally the same, that you can see the same roots in the words. And they're all Semitic language expressions of the same idea. That is my experience of it. I tie it into the beautiful name of God, mu'min, which means faith. And mu'min, as a beautiful name of God, means the embodiment. It is our felt experience of trust, of confidence. And the roots of it are the M in the middle and the N. So amin, that is with the conviction of our hearts, of our spirits, of our awareness, we make this statement. And so it is a confirmation, an affirmation, a solid, with dedication and confidence statement. So in trust, you could say it means in trust. Amen or amen is the pronunciation that you see a lot in Christianity that is probably, I'm not entirely confident about this, probably goes to a Latin pronunciation of it that goes back before the English versions of things where we say amen, brother and sister. The Hebrew and the Aramaic pronunciations were amen, and you could spell it Ameyn if you want, but it's not English letters anyway, it's Hebrew letters. And so amen is the pronunciation that you see in Judaism and in the Aramaic pronunciations of the Jesus prayer, Lord's Prayer, for example. And amin is the pronunciation in Arabic and also in Persian. So it's the same meaning, and it's just what dialect, what language are you looking at, and putting that in context, and however you say it is just fine. Okay, now I want to come back to religion. Because Inayat Khan was asked about this a lot, was asked about the relationship between Sufism and Islam, and and came up with lots of different ways that he answered it, that we have in writing transcripts of ways that he explained and answered this question. And when asked by Marmaduke Pickthall, who is credited with giving the first English translation of the Quran, Inayat Khan was asked if Sufism is not necessarily Islamic, or the word that he used is Mohammedan. And Inayat Khan said that wisdom and revelation are the birthright of every soul. Wisdom and revelation are the birthright of every soul, regardless of faith tradition, regardless of religion, that every soul has access to the direct spirit of guidance and the living reality of the God ideal. And in our Sufi order, He called it our Sufi order or the Sufi movement. We have members from a lot of different faith traditions and also from no faith tradition. And it is not our place to inquire about anyone's faith tradition or to place any expectations on any other human being. That we recognize the sovereignty, the autonomy, and the direct relationship and the potentiality for each human being to develop their own relationship with their own God ideal and to tend to the unfoldment of their own soul. Nobody else knows how to do that. That's up to each individual person. He said, more Murshid, he said, Sufism is not a religion. This is one of my favorite descriptions that he gave. He said, Sufism is not a religion, and it is not a philosophy. But to religious people, it looks like a philosophy, and to philosophers, it looks like a religion. Because in reality, Sufism stands between religion and philosophy and bridges the gap. I love that. So it is a way of thinking about things, and it's also a way of practicing. Haha, excellent question, Randy. I like the question. Uh, yeah, some people would say that. I wouldn't say that. I would say when Inayat Khan started teaching, he was really on a mission, fulfilling his purpose, his instruction given to him by his teacher, Abu Hashim Madani, who said to him, there are a couple different versions of this because it's translated, of course, and interpreted, but in essence, Murshid's teacher said to him, Inayat Khan's teacher said to him, fare forth and harmonize east and west with the music of your soul. To this purpose, you are uniquely gifted. And this is the instruction that Inayat Khan took as he needed to go and learn and interact with and bring harmony to these seemingly disparate perspectives in humanity, East and West. He uses as symbolic. They're not necessarily literal things. And when he first started teaching, the forms and functions that he had most readily available to him were Islamic. And the ways that he gave instruction to his first murid, his first initiated student, included a lot of Arabic and Islamic practices and perspectives. However, that was the beginning point. He quickly realized that Western students, that students that he was teaching in across the United States and also in Western Europe were not able to understand and relate to and apply the teachings and practices in the Islamic Arabic forms. So he adjusted his teaching style and very quickly started giving practices in English and giving different forms of prayers and giving guidance that met the students where they were in ways that felt most relevant, important, accessible. And he even, when he was teaching his more advanced students how to teach, he would tell them not to give practices in any language that was not immediately understandable to the awareness, the personality, the function of the individual murids. That if they were going to give any practices in Arabic or any other languages, they needed to make sure that the students had a really full understanding of what they meant and how they worked so that they're immediately accessible, immediately applicable and meaningful. So we have documents of records that he kept of practices that he gave to hundreds of murids. That we have like the documents from his notebooks and his secretary's notes about the practices that he gave. And most of them are in English and are things like on every day, focus on this English phrase aphorism, like I'm not going to remember one exactly, but it would be something like my life is in balance and my spirit is in harmony with the light of God, or something like that. That would just be, here's an English phrase for you to focus on. And he would give practices like focus on the symbol of the image of an open door, or recite, let my path be illuminated 30 times, or something like that. So lots of things that were not Islamic, not Arabic per se. And it would depend on the murid. Uh, Philosophers and religions. Yeah. Okay, here it is again, Rahmana. Sufism is not a philosophy and it is not a religion, but to religious people, it looks like a philosophy, and to philosophers, it looks like a religion, because in reality, Sufism stands between religion and philosophy and bridges the gap. Okay. So he said, not a religion, but we we are comfortable and we understand what the word religion means. So he said, if you have to call it a religion, call it the religion of the heart. It's not a religion, but if you have to call it a religion, call it the religion of the heart. That's important because, well, in so many, it's important in every way. And he really focused on Sufism as the path of love. And he used a lot of different words for that, but it's woven into the invocation, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty. And that we love what we find beautiful, and we deem beautiful what we esteem as harmonious. So these three primary concepts in his Sufi teachings, love, harmony, and beauty, are the essence of everything. And he talked about a lot of ways that we aim toward creating more and more love, more and more beauty, more and more harmony through the pursuit of wisdom, of understanding, and by shaping our own personalities toward more friendship, toward more tolerance, toward the spirit of brotherhood. That is recognizing that all of humanity is one family, one single brotherhood in the fatherhood of God. That's the phrasing that he used for it. We've adapted it to make it more one single family in the parenthood of God. That's fine. But that all beings are related and have this natural spirit of love, if we are willing to uncover, to clarify and purify the ego structures, the nafs in the Sufi term for it, the religion of the heart, the path of love, the path of friendship, all of these things, he said. Okay, going back a tiny bit. Ooh, where are we? We have a few more minutes before I pause the recording again. In Murshid Inayat Khan's training, in his Sufi training, he was primarily associated with and initiated in the path of the Chishtiya Sufis. That I should put it in the chat window for you because it's an interesting word. That is Chishtiya. You can see it spelled lots of different ways because it's not an English word, but this is one of many, many, many schools of Sufism, and has a stronghold in India, is very, very popular in India. And the Chishtiya Sufi lineage is known for its devotional, ecstatic use of music and poetry and dancing and qawwali music that is like repeated chants with the beautiful names of God, and zikr, and sema, that is sacred music as a practice, that is the path toward realization, toward communion with, toward realizing that the soul is an emanation of God, the divine light, the divine being. So the Chishtiya was the primary Sufi lineage stream, but he was trained in what is referred to not just in Inayat Khan, but there are a collection of different Sufi orders that are prominent in India that include the Qadriya lineage that and the Suhrawardi. Sorry, I'm trying to type and talk at the same time, and the Naqshbandi. And my brain just stopped for a minute while I'm trying to remember what they are. So these four schools of Sufism are often seen together because they function in such different ways. But the combination of them is important to understand the form of Sufism that Inayat Khan was teaching, and saying that it isn't just about this, it's not just about that, it's not just about this. It's everything, every aspect of our humanness, and every function that the spiritual path can play in our lives, and our movement toward happiness, fulfillment, the purpose of the soul, the nature of life, and the reality of God. So between all of these things, we have a lot of different forms of practice and focus. Some of them are much more focused on austerity and meditation, on stilling the mind, on focusing in a very disciplined way. Some of them are more about the philosophy and the exploration of information and esoteric teachings, and developing the wisdom body that is supportive to our understanding of life and our own beings. Some are about the essence of light as a power, a magic, a quality, a living essence that we can develop, that we can strengthen, and that we can cultivate within ourselves and to shine into the world. And some are about the ecstatic expressions of devotion, and how the spiritual life can be one of expressing as much love and joy as we can possibly access in our humanness. Okay, time to pause the recording again. Okay. The question was, there are a few questions in here that I'm going to try to address in a succinct way. People do refer to Western Sufism or universal Sufism, or try to draw some specific distinction and qualification around Sufism. And I understand why people do that, and it makes sense in the ways that we're wanting to be accurate in what we're saying. And at the same time, Inayat Khan said it's Sufism. And some of us had a recent joy, privilege of being with an illustrious Sufi teacher and amazing wisdom keeper, Tasneem Ermila Fernandez. And someone asked about Western Sufism, and she almost leapt out of her skin in I would say, in protest about that phrasing. And she said, if we know what Sufism is, we do not try to make any distinctions or to say that it's a particular special whatever, whatever. And Sufism is Sufism. Sufism is the path of wisdom. And that is true wherever it functions and whoever it meets. That Sufism, just like any experience and essence, teaching, information that moves around into different sects of humanity, into different nations, into different cultures, different languages, it adapts and meets people where they are as they are. Does that make it any specific form of wisdom? No, because wisdom is wisdom. Truth is truth. Reality is reality. And while we each have our own understandings, experiences, or ways that an individual human being finds something useful or explains it or relates to it, that's perfectly fine, but it does not change the nature of reality or the essence of wisdom. So there's my answer to that. And then there's a question about where did Sufism come from? That's an excellent question. If you say, as I just did, Sufism is wisdom, there's no beginning to that. There's no point that you can mark on the calendar or timeline in history that is like, here's the beginning of this or that. Some people say that Adam was the first Sufi. And if Adam was the first Sufi, certainly Lilith was the first Sufi because they were born at the same time. Or, sorry, no, I'm not sorry, but that's true. Or you could say Eve if you identify more as Eve as the first woman, that's fine. A lot of people who practice Sufism and Inayat Khan also would say that any being that has been on the pursuit of wisdom and in direct relationship with the spirit of guidance and trying to commune with, to understand, and to evolve the soul is a Sufi. And in that way, Jesus was a Sufi, Muhammad was a Sufi, Moses was a Sufi, Miriam was a Sufi, Krishna was a Sufi, any of the avatars, any of the great teachers throughout humanity. That doesn't mean that they called themselves a Sufi or that that was a title they claimed, but that is the reality of it. Then Sufism existed in India in that way forever. And Murshid said that Sufism, in the form that most people understand it now, that does have these associations, practices, and the forms that are associated with Islam, that he would say Sufism was born in Arabia, reared in Persia, and finished in India. That was his way of describing it, that it wanders around and takes on different forms and flavors and practices and expressions wherever it goes. And he also said that when he wandered to the West to start teaching Sufism, that was the beginning of offering the Sufi message as it was needed for humanity today. And it was nothing new because, even as Solomon said, there is nothing new under the sun. Murshid referred to that a lot. And he said, this is the beginning of the work of the Sufi message in the form that it's being given to humanity today. And when this form of the Sufi message comes back to the East and takes root again in India, then the real work will have begun. So, there are all kinds of things about the ways that he described the message today. Then he is often attributed, Inayat Khan is often attributed with being the first person to bring Sufism to the West. That is historically not true, but it is often said that way because he was such a prominent teacher, because he had such an impact and taught so widely and had such a strong influence that often when people think about how Sufism came to the United States or to Western Europe, his name is associated with it. You can look into the factual histories of, was there anyone who brought Sufism before? Yes, absolutely. And is he the most prominent, well-known person to do it? Yes, absolutely. Okay. As a practice, because Piro Murshid Inayat Khan gave a lot of practices and shaped them for each individual person. I will say one of the primary practices that he offered was the invocation. I will put it back in the chat window again. And he gave some specific forms of, please try to have the invocation in your awareness first thing in the morning upon waking. As soon as you become conscious that you are in a body about to engage in a new day, think and say the words, towards the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. And if you want to make that an embodied practice, say it as you are stepping out of bed, putting your right foot on the ground as you begin to say, towards the one, so that you're actually doing what you are saying, what you are feeling, what you are intending. So there's a very fundamental practice. If you would like to go a little more like Arabic form of a traditional Sufi beginning of the day is Bismillah. That is, we begin in the name of the one. I'll put that also in the chat window. Bismillah. Uh, so the B is the initiating quality. The sm is the sound, the atmosphere, the essence, or the name, and Allah, God, in the atmosphere of the divine reality. Bismillah. And while you're at it, you can bookend the day by finishing with Alhamdulillah. That is, and all praise to the one. Gratitude for the day, gratitude for life, gratitude as we reflect on our experiences and how we have navigated this human existence for another day, giving thanks for the privilege and the opportunity to be alive, striving toward embodying the qualities and the reality of our own God ideal with every breath. Okay, friends, so grateful for your presence today. I look forward to being with you again. This recording will be posted somewhere in the ethers that you can find online eventually. And we'll be back on here, same Zoom link again, the second Friday in the new year, 2025. Lots of love, big blessings. Bye, friends.